Hey everybody, aloha. Just getting started here today. Sorry about maybe a little extra noise that's going on. My name is Teresa Robertson, and I am just really excited because you're watching the birth conversations, something that we've done every day this week. Kind of in part of it being World Doula Week, partly because of everything that's been going on lately, and with COVID-19, just trying to really come up with a way to really bring in some conversation and community into this new world of a lot of unknowns. So I am actually a portrait and birth photographer. I received my photography degree from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I am DONA trained, currently working on my certification. And so this series of live interviews was, like I said, inspired by the recent COVID-19 outbreak. And also it kind of went in tandem with World Doula Week. So with so many things changing, just sometimes it's minute by minute every single day, I wanted to provide something really consistent and positive that would be helpful to birth families. So my thoughts really just kept coming back to both community and conversation, and wanting to provide a safe space for birth families where we can, help inspire each other, help educate each other a little bit, really help connect so we're not feeling quite so isolated, and just resonate with one another. Even if you're not somebody who's about to give birth, if you're somebody who's already given birth, or you were thinking about becoming pregnant and now you just feel like you're a little uncertain with those plans and what that means for you, just a place for us to really come together, help celebrate and help heal. So again, we've done one of these every day this week, and if you've missed any of the conversations, they are over on a YouTube channel, which I'm going to go ahead and put a link up later on, so that you can go ahead and link to those. Unfortunately, Melanie's story, who is so powerful. She actually has two sons, but her first son tragically passed away shortly after childbirth, I believe about 8 years ago. Her sound didn't go through on the YouTube video. I'm going to make sure to re-interview her, because I think her story is really, really important, and one we don't really get to talk about a lot for those of us who, I shouldn't say us, I apologize, but for anybody who has either gone through a miscarriage or just child loss in general. But moving on to today, I'm super, super excited because I have just a wonderful woman that I'm going to introduce to you. Her name is Shannon. And she is not only going to, as we've been doing this week, talk about her own birth experiences, but she also is a staff nurse at a hospital. I'm just going to leave it at that, and is going to be able at the end of this interview to, just from her own personal perspective, be able to share maybe just a little bit of insight from being in the front lines, maybe help give some, tips or tricks on how to prepare a little bit more with these unknowns that are coming up, so that if you are somebody who's about to give birth, especially in a hospital, might feel a little more equipped and empowered with these changing situations. So Shannon, I'm about to bring you on right now, so hold on just a moment, everyone. If Graceful Fusion Birth Doula is truly on, I love you and I'm so grateful for you and can't believe that you're here, so thank you so much. Let me go ahead and bring on Shannon. Let's see. All right. And Shannon, it should be saying that I'm inviting you right now. Yep, we're good to go. We're getting there. Yay! Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'm sorry. It might be a little bit loud for a second. One of the things I need to get on my list is a new phone holder. Here we go. There we go. So it's doing Instagram Live.
Cropped in here a little bit myself, kind of.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So Shannon, thank you for joining us. Can you please first kind of introduce yourself the way you would want to, let us know your credentials, because I mean, that's really special. That's not, we haven't had, I haven't had a nurse on this week at all. So.
Yeah, sure. I've been a nurse for about 20 years now. The majority of my work as a nurse has been, in maternal child nursing. So I'm a certified inpatient obstetrical nurse. So that's a certification for generally labor and delivery nurses. They get that. I'm certified in electronic fetal monitoring. I'm also a nationally board certified lactation consultant, and I worked in that role exclusively for 3 years. Right now, currently, I work as a staff nurse on labor and delivery again. I'm also a forensic nurse examiner, so I've done a little bit of work in that field as well, but that's kind of on hold right now because of my full-time work status and student status. And my work as a mom. I have 4 kids, so busy, but happy. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
That's awesome. And we actually, just to give a little bit of background, we actually met each other in a hospital due to the volunteer work I do with an organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep.
The best. So, love you guys.
Thanks. Well, we love you and could not do what we do as volunteers without a supportive nursing staff. And I cannot stress that enough. So, with the hospital that I specifically used to serve primarily, I just really did feel so loved and supported. And I know compared to some people, I was very spoiled. So I appreciate you all.
Well, you were famous with us. It was always called.
Thank you. So, so first of all, before we, just kind of move on to more technical, what's happening today, I would love to just really back up and talk about, let's talk about like your first pregnancy, the first time you were, you were pregnant and what that was, a little bit what that was like and leading up to your birth. Did you already have this educational background? So were you very already knowledgeable in what you were about? Okay.
I had been a labor and delivery nurse specifically for about 6 years before I had my first baby at the age of 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you probably kind of felt like, oh, I already know.
I did think that, but I was wrong about that.
That was my next question. Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I think that, from everything, it's funny. I sometimes will tell people when they talk about the work of labor, the sort of clumsiness of early breastfeeding and things like that, that I, even having had the experience of working directly with women who are working in that way and learning in that way, I don't think I had the thought that oh, I'm probably tougher than the rest of these women. It wasn't that. I just really thought I knew what it was going to feel like, or I knew just sort of could instruct myself on labor. It's kind of the way I saw it at the time, and early breastfeeding. And I actually had a really kind of a long, arduous labor, and it didn't feel like I thought it was going to feel, even though I'd seen hundreds of women labor before that. And
were
I think that when I felt, do you want me to skip to labor or pregnancy was fairly uneventful. I mean, I was very lucky. I went way past my due date. I was 41 and a half weeks, 4 centimeters for 3 weeks. And finally the midwives broke my water. We kind of got the show on the road, but it was.
Okay. So that's where I was going to say, that's what's a little bit interesting is going into this. That's what I was going to ask is things were you aiming for unmedicated? You already answered one of my questions. You had a midwife. So here you are where I don't think it's uncommon for people to associate hospital with no midwife and hospital with 100% epidural all the time. And that's
Yes.
interesting how we think about it. So those were some of my questions. So you kind of went what some people would think, a little outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I have definitely had people ask me questions like, I can't believe you're a nurse in the hospital and you had your babies in birth centers and, you know, without...
Oh, hold on just a moment.
I seem to think of it as being like two camps of thought. They really don't need to be. They're, you know, medical science and birth work, you know, it just kind of rides the tide of human development, right? We're learning all the time. We're always kind of trying a new thing and seeing what works with it, and then maybe changing our minds a little bit about it. I mean, birth in the 20 years that I've been doing this, in hospitals even, has changed dramatically. And I do think that and some of the technology, I work at a teaching facility right now where we have like amazing things that happen, fetal surgery, things like that just blow your mind. And those are great gifts. You know, that medical science is a great gift to us, and we don't need to say, I don't do that, because we need that. And it's really amazing what it does and the impact it has on some people's lives. Sometimes birth and pregnancy are very complicated, and I work in a very complicated hospital that sees a lot of complicated cases now. And, you know, we do need the stuff. We do need the interventions. We do need doctors. We do need all those things. But, you know, I also tend to believe and have witnessed the fact that most pregnancies are not complicated. Most labor is not complicated. And that without it being complicated, doing nothing is doing something, right? Yeah. Letting it do what it needs to do is something. A midwife actually taught me that, which I have always loved. You know, doing nothing is doing something. It's making an active choice, something to it. So I think that we're all kind of, you know, I feel like we're all always learning that together, and we are developing, we are changing things as we move forward. So I don't know if that answers that question, but yes, I did plan on having my first baby at a birth center. I chose a hospital that had a birth center attached to it with a midwifery group. It was about an hour away from where I lived at the time, which I could do because I didn't have any other kids. So it was like no big deal to go spend the day doing appointments and stuff. And I did wind up in the hospital with Pitocin augmentation at the midwife's suggestion. I did wind up in epidural. I had a really long labor, pushed for like 3.5 hours. I was 8 centimeters for like 4 hours. I remember all my friends, my labor delivery nurse friends, were calling in like, I can't believe they haven't given you a C-section yet. And
how did that feel? Did that feel encouraging or discouraging?
At that point, I'm going to be completely 100% honest with you. I looked at my husband when I was 8 centimeters for 4 hours and said, like, if they come in here and offer to, like, you know, get this baby out of me with a hammer, we say yes. Like, I'm done. And I was never comfortable with my epidural. I never really got pain relief. So I was pretty miserable. I also gained a lot of weight during that pregnancy. And I do think that had a huge impact on how I labored. All that said, I did end up with an uncomplicated vaginal birth, thankfully, because I had somebody who was doing nothing and was letting it go. I mean, we were doing pit augmentation, we were doing epidurals, stuff like that, but I was changing slowly and the baby looked great. So there was just no need to do this like major surgery, which I am grateful for now. All that said, I am often part of a surgical experience that is a birth experience that has to happen. And I can talk about that a little bit later if you want, but I have really strong feelings on how we treat vaginal birth versus C-section in this country as well. I think they're all births, and I didn't personally have a C-section, but I certainly understand the necessity of them at times, and our role as nurses and birth workers in supporting women through that, all the way through that process. It's not an end of something and now something else is going to happen, right? A woman who's undergoing a C-section is still birthing her baby, right? She still brought this baby to that point of the pregnancy into this world. That's all her. We're just helping out a little different way. So I usually challenge women to be present and stay present for their birth as we are rolling back for an unplanned C-section, because I think it's really important that they don't feel totally passive in a role that they played such a significant part in, right? So, you know, that is something that I've over the years have tried to work really hard on personally, professionally as a nurse, supporting women undergoing a C-section. For whatever reason,
and this is why I say that when I was volunteering, you know, along you and other people, you know, I mean, those thought processes are so welcomed and needed. And this is where I obviously want to be very careful with these conversations that we have, no matter what aspect of birth or pregnancy that we're talking about, because it's very easy for us to make blanket statements about certain things. And so I certainly don't want to, I just want to say that, you know, people, it would be wonderful if we had more advocates like you advocating for self-empowerment, be it from hospital births or home births, you know, anybody who's surrounding a birthing person. If we had those types of empowerment, you know, empowering words and thoughts from anybody, family, friends, whoever would be.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. The reason that I kind of went down that path is I heard myself talking about how long I pushed and how long I was stuck at 8 centimeters. Relatively speaking, I would never, ever want to. There were things going on then that are different than somebody who really has been 8 centimeters and not changed for 4 hours, and despite adequate contracting and all the things that we make those decisions for. So I caught myself a little bit talking about that because I wouldn't want somebody to say, oh my God, you know, I was 8 centimeters for 3 hours. Maybe my doctor should have waited another hour. That's not what I'm saying. It was its own unique thing. There are definitely signs that it's time to have a surgical birth. And so I don't want people to second guess themselves. I don't want people to second guess their providers. My specific thing was, okay, by some very, you know, standard application at the time of rules, it was surprising to some of my colleagues that they hadn't taken me back for a C-section. But my midwife felt that I was still on the path toward a vaginal birth. And so she just kept me on that path. Again, certainly there are times where, you know, where she would have made the same midwife who I worked with as a nurse since the time that I gave birth. That same midwife certainly is one that will be able to call it when it needs to be called, you know, that this is kind of time to decide to have a birth not the way that was planned. Typically people going into, you know, an induction or something like that. I don't think people usually don't think about what if I have a C-section? Like, I think we just don't grow up, like as a little girl, you know, unless maybe your mother talks about her C-sections a lot, you kind of don't think of it that way. So when it happens, it's usually a little overwhelming because that's not like where you've prepared your mind.
Well, and that's where I appreciate that thought process, because when I'm meeting honestly with families and we're talking about birth plans, which I know a lot of people are familiar with that phrase, but they don't necessarily know what that means. So I usually encourage people to think of it as birth preference.
Love it.
And that's where, when I sit down with families and we're talking about their birth preferences, we do go over C-section scenarios and we don't harp on it, but just to reiterate that if at least we're let's just visit this for a couple of moments and just think about this very briefly on if this were to happen, so that in the moment you are not so thrown, you know, it kind of, you know, hopefully would take the edge off a little bit, just a little bit more, so that at least we've visited that.
Right. That's wonderful. Like how are you going to think about that? What do you think that an operating room looks like if you've never been in one before? You know, and like sort of trying to sort of see yourself there doesn't defeat preferences that you want not to have an epidural. There is a really great like birth model. I don't know if you heard of Birthing from Within, but I really love that book because the way it talks about planning for birth, really puts sort of the outcome of birth. It takes it like off of like a woman's determination. All it asks of the woman is to make peace with her birth environment and trust the people around her, and then allow and trust them to help her in decision making and things like that. But it also says, you know, if you make a strict plan and say, this is how I'm doing it, you kind of take the reality of birth away. And it's kind of unfair to the whole process, right? Birth is so dynamic and so fascinating. It's like the closest thing that we do to the animals, right? It's like, that is so different than anything else that we've wrapped, you know, things that birthing is not something you can like wrap your brain around, like preparing for a big test or preparing to run a marathon, right? You can't like will yourself to it. You have to give over to it in a way that we're not used to doing as thinking human beings. And here, I really love that model, because I think it allows you to sort of get into that animalistic zone that says, I'm in this small space in the woods, away from predators. I'm comfortable to them around. I trust the people around me, and I trust this environment. This is my home, and this is where I'm going to give birth. And then I think that really allows people to make peace with sort of however it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know I apologize because we are derailing from your personal birth story, which I wanted to like give you the honor of, you know, being able to share that with people. But I do, and we don't have to talk about it right now, but I do, as you say, you know, those words like making sure that you're in a comfortable environment. That's where I feel like the conversations that I've had with some women that are about to give birth right now, a lot of their anxiety is coming in because, you know, some of these women are, you know, they're not in the same region, they're not in the same area, they're not going to the same place, the same environment where they're going to give birth. Mm-hmm. But the common thread is, wait a second, like, even though I've already had children, even though, you know, I'm aware that things could change, but all of a sudden you're also changing my safety as far as who's going to be with me during this birth process, who is going to be taking care of me. I don't know who to trust anymore. Yeah. And having conversations about, these are the things that we just honestly can't control today, but let's look at every small detail of what you can control in order to build that safe environment around yourself. Mm-hmm. So you're not having that additional stress and causing more complications during your birthing process.
So true. So true.
So, yeah. Do you have any, I mean, I'll just go ahead and jump. We were going to talk about it at the end, but I'll just jump. Like, do you have any advice for those?
For right now?
Things, you know, especially if they were anticipating coming to the hospital and bringing their spouse in some cases where that may or may not happen, bringing a birth support person, which most likely isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to put words in other hospitals.
Yeah. The guidance under COVID-19 right now in hospitals regarding visitation policies, and it's so hard for me to think of, like, your partner is not a visitor, like they're a pivotal part of your birth experience. But the rules around that have been changing like multiple times a day in the same day, even sometimes they're getting stricter where I live, because we are having now we're at the brink of this tipping point. We're going to start to see a lot of increasing diagnosed cases, trying to keep everybody safe. And, you know, we're trying to keep
which is the bottom
everybody
line.
safe. So it's not even like I think that in this country, we really have a hard time because people will say, well, I'm not worried about me getting sick. It's like, no, we're trying to keep like the entire city safe by putting these visitation policies into play. Right now, we are telling people that they can have their partner and they can have one visitor, basically. It might be their partner. For a while, we were allowing doulas if they could prove that there was a contract, that they were working together. And now we're having people only have one visitor for 24-hour periods, so that you can't switch out people. You can't have like a wheel of people coming in one at a time. It's like whoever's your person that's there. Like, we had to tell somebody the other day who had an unplanned C-section. Her mother happened to be there at the moment. and her husband had left and then therefore was not there for the C-section. Her mother came out and said, I'd like to switch out so her husband can meet the baby. And we couldn't let her do that. We had to say, like, can you stay like today and he can come tomorrow? And I just like need people to know that like this stuff like breaks our hearts. And if we're sitting there and saying things to people like, sorry, that's the rule, and we have to go by those policies, we understand them, we're trying to keep everybody safe, we're heartbroken for families when we're having to tell them these things. We're thinking of our own selves and thinking, oh my God, if when I gave birth this was the policy, I would be like so upset. If my spouse was downstairs and he couldn't come up and meet the baby after he was born, he had to come the next day, just seems like unthinkable. And we're so sorry. I mean, as a medical community, I really can speak on behalf of everybody. We're not happy that these policies are happening, but we are concerned with community safety, and we have to act accordingly.
Right. And do you feel that at this stage, and again, I feel like a lot of these things that are happening today, we can put them in places of things that maybe have happened in the past or may happen in the future, not necessarily on this grand of a scale, but just kind of understanding like, and starting to consider options of, like you said, with your birth, like if things don't go the way you are visualizing them to go, even if you are just like, I'm going to go to the hospital, get an epidural, have a baby, go home. Like, right. We kind of always talk about that being the most like, for people who really are not looking into birth plans or preferences or anything like that. Right. But I understand it's a fine line, but kind of like when we were talking about the C-sections, visiting and understanding, first of all, obviously try to always keep up on wherever you're giving birth, what the protocol is for that. Mm-hmm. But also just kind of taking a temperature check on what other facilities are doing, not to scare yourself, if they are really more limiting than what your birth environment is going to be, but just so you can think about if that policy were to change and become more strict, what is our plan for that? Do you recommend that people kind of keep an ear open for what is happening with other facilities so at least they can start thinking about what plan C, D, E, F, G is potentially going to be, or do you think that's just causing unnecessary worry?
Well, that's a great question, Teresa. Unnecessary worry, I have people, that are 3 months out that are, like they're due in 3 months and they're like worried, I just don't, and it's like, we have no idea where we're going to be in 3 months. That's the reality of it. Yeah. I think that to worry excessively is not really helpful. I mean, people have to kind of determine that for themselves and their own mental health, I guess, but I don't think it's going to do anything. I think that actually, in some ways, it's asking us to do what we should always be doing with birth, which is to be very flexible and very open to a new thing. Birth is so funny. Like, people take for granted that we let spouses, or I shouldn't say spouses, partners, that you can have a support person in an operating room when you have a C-section. We're not allowing that right now. Yes. But there is no other surgical procedure that happens in this country, no matter what you're going to surgery for, where you would invite somebody, a non-medical staff member, to come into the surgical environment and be there. I mean, even that became so commonplace. Where really it's uncommon, to lead somebody who isn't trained to be in an operating room into there and be in the room while a surgery is being performed. I mean, it's a big deal. So I don't want to be like, yeah, well, you shouldn't be here anyway. But like, it's already like a big deal that I think it's such an important thing that we let support people into the C-section environment. However, that is so like, that's not how any other procedure goes. If your 5-year-old has a surgery, you as a mother do not get to go to the operating room to be with them while they're having a surgery. and it is a real exception to the rule of how hospitals work in general. So I think, I don't want to ask people to say, like, just deal with it. It's such a terrible way to be about it. But I think that people just need to realize we're all being asked to do all sorts of things that we're not used to doing, right? Like, how weird is it that, like, my best friends live 3 doors down from me and we haven't seen them, touched them, hugged them. Yeah. Our kids aren't playing together, even though they're all home from school. I mean, this is unprecedented. I don't think anybody alive today recalls, going through something like this. So it's touching every single faction of our society, right? So people who are giving birth are a part of that group, and they're going through a really unique challenge right now that we understand in the hospital. I think come prepared to feel like you're going to be on lockdown there for a couple of days. Bring lots of snacks, bring things to entertain yourselves. If you're going to be alone, make sure you've got chargers for your phones and computers. You can still FaceTime, you can show your family your baby. You can, we still have that technology, thank goodness. So you have some ability to share your birth experience. It's just not going to be necessarily in the way that we're used to. I mean, we used to walk right up to the gate of an airport, right? Like right to the gate for the plane to say goodbye to our family members. And we've all adjusted to that's like a no-go if you don't have a ticket, right? So, I think just things change, and this is, I'm kind of just, I don't have a whole lot to say because I don't even have experience in telling people how to feel quarantined in a hospital. I've never had to ask people to do that before. Right. So I have thought of if somebody asked me like what you should bring, make sure you've got lots of chargers and things like that so you can make sure you can stay in touch with your family. Bring things, that you think will help you to be comfortable, kind of tuned in, snacks, probably a big deal, like food and drinks you like, that you can consume in the hospital because everything's limited. Right now we can't say it's okay if your partner goes to the store and gets your favorite food and then brings it back. Like they can't leave. So it's hospital food, which but especially for your partner, they need to eat, and there's not a lot of options for them right now if they can't leave the hospital. Right. So I know it seems like such a silly thing to say, like bring snacks, but that's something that people are in the hospital like, oh, I haven't eaten anything.
Well, right. And that's where, so first of all, that's like one of the reasons why I really, really appreciate this conversation, even though, we've been focusing on a lot of personal birth stories this week, but I really appreciate this conversation because I'm not sure how many people are having, are being able to be a part of these open conversations. I mean, certainly you being a nurse and in a medical setting, with labor and delivery, you're, get in meetings. I know as far as like just different organizations that I'm part of, like Donut International, we're getting webinars from the medical community and trying to educate ourselves. But as far as like the actual families go, that's where, I was hoping this week to be able to kind of bridge that gap and be able to start having these conversations that made people a little bit more comfortable with even like reaching out to other people to talk. Mm-hmm. But so when we talk about, when you talk about things like just bringing snacks, I know that might seem like a little thing, but in the reality of it, with where we're at right now, that is something you can, and that is a positive, we have to be able to put those tiny things into, these columns of where we can have success and empowerment, even if it seems like bringing a fresh apple is, part of it. Like that's just where we're at.
Yes, if that's something you love to have, and that's going to help because it can be very comforting as well to have your familiar foods. So they know we're somewhat limited in the hospital right now too. I wouldn't bring things that had to be refrigerated because
that's a good point.
We're trying not to do like you put things in the refrigerator that came from your house and you touch it with your fingers, and now somebody else is going to come to that refrigerator and take something else out. So all those things are kind of different. So yeah, I would not bring anything that needs to be stored in the refrigerator right now. Only things that you could keep like in your room at your bedside. This was a really good conversation, Teresa. I'm really grateful that you're bringing this up. I don't know why we aren't. I don't think that there's a lot of like, oh, everybody in the community, let's talk about what's going to happen when you go to the hospital under COVID. Because I don't think we know what to say. I mean, we're literally still going like, we're not letting a second person in. You know, we're already feeling a little bit like I think so many things about a pandemic and what you have to do just goes against human nature. Like if you go and like, if you have like a natural disaster or something like that, you have an abundance of hugging going on, right? You have an abundance of people reaching out and bringing things to you and all that stuff. And right now we're literally like having to tell human beings to don't go near each other, even if you love them. And that is just so against human nature. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, and even the people, and I know this is like so far removed emotionally and even mentally to what, for lack of a better phrase, I'll call the average birthing family. Between them and the people who are making the decisions right now for what is going to happen to that family that is going to be going through the birthing process, the fact that for some people, like these decisions are having to be made on such like on paper, black and white issues. So it's like you're making these decisions and then you're then having to process it emotionally of like, I can't believe I just told somebody that these are their boundaries and who they're not allowed to either bring with them or what they're not allowed to bring with them. Like these decisions are happening so fast, and I think it's going to be profound to watch the mental and emotional toll it takes as we're healing from all of this, not just from the people who have also gone through it, but from the decision makers who, you know, we're just going to have to be honest with ourselves on what we did right and what in the future we're going to have to work on a little bit more. But that transition of grace, like I just keep telling people, I'm like, you know, we've got to be, my husband and I had this conversation about the decisions we make, just any decision we make. And I said, listen, as a family, obviously we're going to try to do the safest things for us, but we're probably going to make a mistake or two. And we're going to have to be okay with that, learn from it, and then improve beyond there. But right now, like, that's easier for me to say with my family, but like with rapid fire situations like this, and families just coming in, you know, you can't.
Yeah, I mean, that's like that's the work of any mature system, right? Is to keep learning from mistakes and trying to do better. But we're like babies in the pandemic. We don't know, you know, we're not really sure. We know like what we need. We know what we're missing in the hospitals. I also want to say this, at least from my hospital, and I'm really like proud of this. There is a lot of mental stress right now on healthcare workers in general. And we are, you know, we're being like inundated with like 500 emails a day about COVID and, you know, what we're going to do and the new policy. And now what we're going to do is this. And like, it's kind of mentally exhausting. We are already conserving PPE. We don't have enough if we have a true crisis, as every hospital in this country doesn't. But I would say, I believe this in my heart of hearts, and I work at a teaching facility. I'm very proud of where I work, and our residents are awesome. We're still totally committed to you and your birth experience. There's not, we are under a lot of mental stress, and the chatter out at the nurses station probably is a lot about, oh my gosh, this new policy and all this stuff that's going on. And now we're all being issued, you know, face masks and, you know, all this stuff. So like, there is that, like, that is going on in the background. But I will say that I've not been part of one birthing experience since all this really heated up the last couple of weeks, where there isn't just this total dedication to good birth outcomes and a parent's experience being, you know, new parents in the hospital with a baby. We understand how they are also feeling mentally strained and stressed. Everybody is. And we understand that, you know, there's a lot, but we've mostly had like, I mean, I've been amazed at how willing so many of our patients, I go to tell them, I'm sorry, you can't switch out with the baby's father. I'm like bracing myself for what normally is going to happen, which is going to be, I'm going to get yelled at. I'm going to be told I'm heartless. I'm going to be told all that, it's like, I'm ready for this, but it's not what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing people truly coming together, and saying, I understand. It's okay. I'll stay with her. And it's like, I'm just so humbled by that, by what's going on in the hospital, by what the staff is doing, and by what patients and their families are doing. I'm really humbled by it. I think there's a real sense of coming together and working really hard together, which I love. So that is truly, for the most part, how it's going. There's always outliers to every situation, but generally speaking, I would not come into birth at a hospital right now thinking anything less than the same high performance from your medical team and your nursing team, and your doulas and all your support people that you would have under any other circumstances. Yeah. Just a little more constrained with visitation policies.
Yeah, I've been pretty pleased to, at least, and like you said, policies aside, and I don't know, I feel like right now is almost like the time where, like, even if you, which I'm not saying I don't agree, but even if you didn't agree, like, I know us all trying to get on the same page, like, we're going to have to agree to disagree right now, because nobody is being malicious.
Right.
This is not coming from a place of, I don't think you need an extra person to support you. This is not coming from a place of, it's just, we truly, if we, especially from the doula side, the push of, listen, like, we've always wanted to work together. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to continue to go after that goal, like, we really need to respect each other, mm-hmm. and care for each other, and know that everybody's coming from a place of good intentions, even when it just hurts now.
Yes.
So
totally. Thank you for saying that. And I think that's where the things are. But we have a choice to make as a society right now, to shift thinking and to shift process, and to still find a way to find joy, and and still find that ultimate joy in what having a baby is. I've seen, some hospitals aren't allowing any visitors. No, 0 visitors. Yeah, so a woman goes in and has a baby with only, like, a nurse she's never met before. And I've seen some, like, really beautiful things on nursing forums, specifically, like, labor and delivery, where nurses are like, I'm gonna do everything in my power to, if I'm the only person you have, I'm going to be everything I can be for you. I'm going to try harder than ever, to be everything for you. And it's not going to take the place of having your partner there. It's not going to take the place of having your doula. It's not the place of your mother, but I'm going to be here so 100% for you. And we're all kind of all feeling in this together, in the hospital environment right now. I think there's a real spirit, of, like, trying a little harder, that's happening right now. And nobody wants a pandemic to bring that out of people, but in a way it's kind of beautiful to see that is kind of how people are mostly responding.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's important too, because again, it goes back to that, showing that this is coming out of a place of love and good intention. And, I'm glad that at least I hear, just even on my own personal social media pages, support for that coming through. So I can't imagine, I can't imagine any side of any of this right now.
It's unthinkable. It's unprecedented. Even stories that I hear coming out of, like, New York City right now and stuff like that are just, like, unimaginable. And I'm seeing it with my eyes, so it's not like I don't believe it. It is what's happening. I'm gratefully not in New York City, and it's just like, even though that's, like, a reality and that it's kind of everywhere, it's like, I think we're all having a really hard time wrapping our brains around it. And it's just, this is a historic time. I think, we'll definitely look back and there will be lessons learned and things like that. Hopefully we won't have a whole lot more pandemics in our lifetime to have to reenact all this. But I think we're going to come out changed as an entire human race.
I think that's my biggest fear, is we won't. Like, to be
be
perfectly
worried if
honest.
people didn't, change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, even when this first started, and there started to be murmurs of, I think things are going to be different from here on out. And my first response was, to be honest, I hope they are. Like,
Yes. If
and
they are
maybe,
yeah.
maybe that's looking through rose-colored glasses, you know, because I'm assuming it's going to be for the better, you know, but that's where I'm like,
you're
no,
so right.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But
I
that
can't tell if it's obvious, but I'm sort of an optimist. So I often like to, I walk with rose-colored glasses on a lot. And, you know, I don't, yes, you're correct. I don't tend to, I expect the best. I expect the best from people. And even when time and time again, it shows me that they're not, you know, not being the best.
I think we'll always have those challenges, but
it just is how we are. It's just kind of, you know, but I really couldn't do my work if I didn't walk around really optimistic, because in my work, there's so much fear. And there's so much like uncertainty on behalf of a family going through labor and learning how to breastfeed and all those things. And I kind of have to sort of approach every problem with like, in 5 days, this is going to be so much better, you know, or you're going to feel so much better. And, you know, on the other side of this, you know, I promise it's going to this will work out. It will get better. And so I kind of have to keep that in my own line of work. I think it's kind of essential.
Yeah.
You can do it.
I could talk to you for hours.
Me too. I love talking with you, Teresa. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. I feel the feeling is mutual. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. And again, is there anything else that you want to share about, you know, your story, my birth stories? Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I wound up having that first baby in the hospital. One of the best things that happened, because it was so arduous, like it was insane. Mm-hmm. Like I just thought I thought it was like, I kind of thought I was going to like break or something. Like I don't know. That was a very psychological, challenging thing to have happen. But the next morning after change of shift, I delivered at 4:30 in the morning, and after change of shift, my nurse came in. I did not deliver at the hospital I worked, so I didn't know anybody there. She came in and she was like, "Hi, you know, I just wanted to check in with you because we're going to move you to the postpartum floor soon. I have a couple of other patients that also delivered, but you're my easy one. So I wanted to peek in here real quick and see if you needed anything." And I remember being like, oh my God, I totally am the easy one. Like everything, like she's right. From a nursing perspective, it was like, I'm fine. I'm better than fine. Like everything's going great, you know? Yeah. Just like during the birth process itself, it felt insane and crazy and arduous and just like, you know, insane. So it was always kind of like a nice thing. It's like, oh my God, I am the easy one. I'm the easy patient. Like everything's fine, you know? And so, that was kind of nice. Breastfeeding was a huge struggle for me with my first baby, especially. And I was so frustrated by that because my mom like sort of seamlessly breastfed all 7 of the kids in my family that I grew up with. And like, it was no big deal. And I just thought it'd be no big deal. And I helped women to breastfeed. And
I was going to say, just because also for anybody that joined this conversation a little bit late, mm-hmm. That's one of your jobs. Like,
yeah, I became a lactation consultant after that, but I still, as a labor and delivery nurse and postpartum nurse, you know, breastfeeding support is something I'd done a lot of, and I just thought I knew exactly how to do it, and it hurt. I was in a lot of pain. This was 12 years ago. There is really a lot more support. I'm proud to say today, I think you can get a lot more hands-on direct support than was available at the time. But I was in a lot of pain, and I called my sister-in-law in California who had a baby like a year before me and got through some breastfeeding challenges. I told her, I hate this. It's miserable. I don't want to do this. I totally see why people stop doing it. And she couldn't help me directly with the physical challenges of what were going on, but she just basically said to me, just hang in there. like, believe me, that baby, like, you're going to come out of this, and like in a year from now, it's like the most wonderful thing, and your baby's going to be stuck to you like, what is she, like a barnacle at all times, I think she called it. And it was just having somebody say, don't give up, just keep going, just take the next step, was really great, you know. I saw this amazing quote, and I'm going to mess this up. It's the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, is, I believe, the name of the book. But there's a quote by that author that he put out separate from the book itself, and it's just a lot of these sort of inspirational quotes. But this applies to right now. This applies to labor and delivery. This applies to breastfeeding. This applies to motherhood. This applies to COVID-19. The boy is walking through this very thick forest with the horse behind him. And the boy says to the horse, I can't see a path through this. I can't see a way through. And the horse says to the boy, can you see your next step? And the boy says, yes. And the horse said, then just take that. And I thought that was just amazing. Yeah. And I think that's what we have to do, you know, with all these challenges of today and yesterday and since the dawn of time. But it was wrapped that up nicely. And I thought, especially in these uncertain times, it was such a powerful quote.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have to look that up.
It's beautiful. I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
I'll share it here if you like.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
but I had 3 more babies. I did deliver in birth centers after that, and those were unplanned because for the second baby, like,
pregnancies or unplanned births.
Both, all.
Okay.
But the second birth, they were like, do you want to deliver in a birth center? I was like so frustrated by that question. I'm like, well, that's what I wanted to do the first time, and I went up in the hospital, you know. And so no, I didn't have this renewed, like, yes, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen now. And I just happened to go into labor on my own. I just happened to be 6 centimeters and wasn't dying. And they just happened to open the door of the birth center and say, go have the baby in there. And I was like, okay. And it was a great experience. That was like such an empowering birth. My third was a toughie, also at a birth center. And I thought, I was so scared of having another baby with my 4th baby. And it was absolutely the most healing experience. I had a tub, like a water birth with her. And it really was healing for me, because my third one was really scary and very painful. And the 4th one was like, I thought I was bracing myself for it to be awful again, and it just wasn't. And that was a nice sort of wrap it all up. No more babies for me. I'm all done. Yep. but still, I plan to be working around birth probably for a long time. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I really appreciate your message. I mean, and not just a message, but just sharing your experience where, like, even though you went to school, you know, like, you worked in labor and delivery for 6 years before your first birth. And then you had 4 births that were, you know, all had different details to them. All, you know, I don't think saying the phrase like going against your training is necessarily correct, but definitely kind of not, you know, kind of feeling like, oh, I got this, you know, and then
did not got this. It's a great unifier, you know. Birth kind of, I think, is this really humbling thing that makes everybody sort of, you have to like have gone through it to understand it, to know it, to know the sleeplessness and the vulnerability that you feel as a brand new parent is just something that can't be taught to you. When I take care of obstetricians and pediatricians, even, they'll say, like, talk to me like you talk to everybody else. Like, talk to me like I have no idea, because that's how I feel right now.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Like, yes.
Thank you. I have a girlfriend who is a very knowledgeable birth worker. And I know during one of her births, when she went in, she knew the team very well. And she felt like she was somewhat, you know, approached with this, like, well, you know what to do. And yes. She's like, no, could someone please take care of me? Like,
yes.
I know that on a normal day I would know what to do, but could someone please treat me like I don't? And could someone please care for me and love me right out of the way?
Right. And also, I need like that they deserve that same level of support, not like, you got this, you know. And you know, after so many have straight up said it, I need your support. I need you to walk me through this right now, because the laboring brain is not like the same as I'm going to approach this math problem brain, or right. I'm going to approach this work problem brain, because right. it has so many other beautiful demands being placed on it. It's not able to conquer it, or to use previous training or medical knowledge, to make decisions. You're not in decision-making mode. Again, it goes back to that birthing from within model that says you're not in decision-making mode. You trust the team around you and the people around you, because that's not the work of what your brain needs to be doing right now. Yes. Your brain needs to be turn inward and do this.
Yeah. And that's where, I'm just gonna, that was perfect. I'm not even gonna, Okay. Absolutely.
Anyway,
well, thank you.
I love that you're doing this. Thank you so much for having me, and for allowing me to share a little bit of what's going on, in my life, and with what's going on with hospitals right now.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate it. And I know you've just got so much on your plate right now. So I really do appreciate your time, and just not just your knowledge, but your compassion as well. So that's why I was a little bit more like, no, we have to get on here and talk together.
No,
this is a perfect way to end it. So
I'm so glad.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Much love to you and your family from afar.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and put this on.
Mahalo.
I'll let you. I'm sorry?
Mahalo.
I'm going to go ahead and let you know when I get the YouTube link up and running, because I definitely feel like a lot of people need to hear your words. So
thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Teresa, thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take
Aloha.
care. Bye. Aloha.